Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Progressive Bitcoiner. I'm your host, Trey Walsh, and today we have on the show American HODL and Erik Cason. So I wanted to have them both on the show. They both are folks that have some ties and roots in the left and progressive and different thoughts about where our politics have headed, where our world has headed, especially post 9/11. And we talk about Bitcoin, we talk about Nostr, and really I just wanted to center things around the question of, can Bitcoin fix our broken politics? That it seems like everyone is in agreement that our politics is broken, our partisanship is broken. We typically have presidential candidates that neither party is really crazy about in terms of the voters, and it just keeps happening year after year after year. Well, those of us in Bitcoin are a little bit hopeful for a different path forward and a new world that's filled with hope in things like Bitcoin and things like Nostr and other freedom tech. So this is a really great conversation. I mean, we talked about so many different philosophies and ideologies in this, and I really hope for those listening, especially from the left or progressives, that you stick through the episode, right? You're not going to hear agreements, or you're not going to agree with everything in this episode. No one would, but this is just a really robust conversation with two people that I respect, two people that I don't agree with everything that they would have to say either, but it's a rich conversation. And I want to have more of these type of conversations on this show where we can civilly disagree, where we can talk about things out in the open and talk about the better world that we want to see and the hope that we have, and be prepared with things like Bitcoin and things like Nostr going forward. So hope you all enjoyed this episode. I know a lot of you will. Either way, you can always reach out to me in our Telegram group. You can hit me up on Nostr or email hello@progressivebitcoiner.com. All right, I'll let you get into the episode, and we will see you again next week. HODL, Erik, thanks for coming on the show. How are you guys doing?
Good to be here, man.
Nice to be here as well.
Awesome. Well, let's get into it. We were already talking before, and I was like, let's hit record because we gotta capture some of this. So you both are on the Progressive Bitcoiner podcast. There are some people that have literally said, "What are you guys doing going on that show?" Or the types of conversations we have. And I think I was really interested to have both of you on the show. You both have talked together on other shows. You're on Peter's show recently. Both of you have gone on shows like Erik, your book, HODL, you're all over stages and pods now. So I think a lot of people have heard from you both. But where I'd like to take this conversation, and I think would be really interesting, is to talk a little bit about both of your backgrounds in terms of in Bitcoin, but before Bitcoin, like what made you interested in it, kind of our commonality in some left-leaning things, particularly the anti-war, anti-corruption, the kind of former left things that we've talked about. And if Bitcoin can play any role in fixing our broken politics, because I think politics are severely broken. I think most people are dissatisfied, whether it's with leading political candidates, leading political parties in the US specifically, but worldwide. I think a lot of people are just really dissatisfied. We seem stuck in it still. People are still just, they're either not voting or they're still just voting because they're like, this is kind of what we need to do. And it's perpetuating a broken system, perpetuating broken money, all of that. So I want to get into that with you guys. And I think it would be a really interesting conversation, regardless of who's tuning in, right? Even if some people are tuning in that are very much in the left camp and might be a little triggered in this conversation, or someone from the right that's listening to this conversation and thinks they have progressives in the left, they understand fully what's going on. I think there's a lot of nuance here. But why don't we kick things off? HODL, you've talked about it a little bit. I know a little bit of kind of some of your story and background, but I think in terms of like progressive or the left, the anti-war stuff, can you talk to people a little bit about your background when you started, what you were passionate about? You've mentioned on air before you voted for Obama. You know, there's some things in you that I think resonates with like the left audience that has since changed, politics and whatever. But can you talk a little bit about your background?
Yeah, totally. So, okay, here are my liberal bona fides, although I'm not currently a liberal. So,
shocker. Spoiler.
But,
just kidding.
You know, I was 11 years old, 12 years old when 9/11 happened. And then I watched, the invasion of Afghanistan, the Iraq War, the Patriot Act, the suspension of freedoms. Then when I was, 18, 19, the GFC hit. And then we had, bailouts for corporations that were basically gambling with people's pensions. And I was like, holy shit, my head was spinning. And then, when I was like 30 something, I was starting a family, and then we had COVID and these like authoritarian lockdown measures, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, for me, it's just been this long progression towards like waking up and just basically being like, what is happening? Like, none of this is as advertised. Like, it's like, our democratic system is not working as advertised. That's clear with the Patriot Act. And then our financial system capitalism is not working as advertised. That's clear with the GFC. And then, like, when we get to COVID, it's like, are we just all serfs on government land? We're just like a meat puppet on government land who are being told to do what the fuck we're told to do. Do I have no goddamn say in this society, right? And then in terms of like being a young ideological liberal, like, yeah, I mean, I was in Grant Park the night Obama got elected, and I was drunk and high and was fucking high on hope and change. I remember I was wearing a David Bowie Ziggy Stardust t-shirt, but it was Obama's face as Ziggy Stardust.
Oh, and it said, God. Do you have photos from that? We need some photo proof of that.
I probably have some photos somewhere, but I still have the shirt somewhere too.
That's so funny.
And it said shit changes on the shirt, which is fucking amazing. And then Obama was the first politician to burn me because I was 18 when I voted for Obama, and I believed everything. I really like drank the Kool-Aid. I believed in the hopey changey bullshit. You get to be naive and stupid when you're 18, right? And so like I was high on life, and like I was literally running around high-fiving people. I was like, we did it, bro. We fucking did it. We got a young, smart black guy. Everything's gonna be okay now. We're good. It was not good, friends. It turned out very bad. And Obama immediately became a tool of the deep state establishment. And it happened with such speed because of the GFC that it made my head reel. And by the time 2012 came around and he was running against Romney, I just decided I'm done with politics. I'm not voting anymore. So I sat out that election. I also sat out in 2016 because I was like, Trump and Hillary, what the fuck? This is like ass clown against ass clown. And I couldn't get down with that either. So I sat out. And then in 20 and in 24, I saw how tyrannical the Democratic Party had become. And I was like, we simply must, we must vote against this to stop this, because this is, the destruction of America, period, full stop.
Let's put a pin in that. We'll pick that up. Erik, what about you in terms of your background and where your values come from? Maybe you weren't as gullible as HODL. Just kidding.
No, I was more gullible.
Okay.
I identified as far left for a long time. I identified as socialist and communist. And, I studied international relations at university. I originally wanted to be a diplomat. I was very gung-ho and believing that like government really works. You just have to have the right people in the right positions, and like you can make it happen. And then Occupy Wall Street came, and I was like, yeah, like we're doing it. We're challenging the structure. We're making it clear that like, the financial system's the problem. And I went out and I protested, and I was part of Occupy Oakland, and I was part of Occupy Philadelphia. And then when I was in Philadelphia, I remember the moment that everything changed was I was talking to a lot of people. I was meeting a lot of anarchists, and they were kind of red pilling me on the idea of socialism and communism, and it gave me something to think about. It was the first time I heard about Bitcoin. A random masked anarchist told me about Bitcoin, and that was really important, and that I needed to look at it. And I was like, yeah, whatever, magic internet money. And then when I was in Philadelphia, I was on top of the Freedom to Assemble memorial, because like we were assembling and we were like, hey, police, like check it out. Like we're in this like sacred space of using our rights to protest. And they're like, yeah, like get the fuck out of here. We're going to beat the shit out of you. And I was like, no, like you guys don't understand. These are like our rights. Like we get to be, and then they hit me in the face with a truncheon. And I was like, Jesus fucking Christ. Like, I think you broke my fucking, and then they hit me in the arm, and I was like, what the, oh my God. And they just kept fucking beating me. And I remember I was like on top of the memorial, like, Jesus fuck. I was like, I don't think these guys are our friends. Like, I don't think these police officers actually believe in this. And like, I had this really dark moment where I was like, holy shit, like these people can just do whatever the fuck they want. Like they don't give a fuck at all about the fact that like I have rights that like they're supposed to respect and stuff. And like, I very sincerely thought they'd like raise their truncheon to hit me, and they'd be like, his like friend would be like, hey, hang on though. He has these First Amendment rights. You can't just beat the fucking shit out of him, man. And lo and behold, it turned out that I was actually deeply, deeply gullible towards the fact of that rights aren't something that actually exist in any meaningful way. And actually, the entire 20th century is specifically a story about people being stripped of their rights and then openly killed by their government. And so after going through this pretty long and deep blackpilling process, I actually realized that if you look at the 20th century and all of the horrific things that happened, pretty much all of them were perpetrated by governments that gave themselves the power to do that. And what I've seen over the development of the last 15 years in the United States is that there has been a very clear and consistent violation by the federal government towards all of our rights. And it usually does that under the purview of that the government loves you and wants to help you, and that this is a really positive thing. And like, I really want to believe it. I want to believe all this stuff, that like the government's good, that these people are in there with the right ideals, that like if we just vote for the right people can change. It's just fucking bullshit. And it's part of a complete propaganda nightmare that we've lived inside, where we've been told like we have democracy and you can vote. Like if we have democracy, why the fuck is it that when we live in a state that isn't a swing state, our vote doesn't matter whatsoever? Like, why is it that we talk so much about democracy, but when any radical new form of democracy presents itself, we're told that's anti-democratic? And then, like, where we're at now, to me, is absolute fucking insanity. Like, the leading Democratic candidate for the party had literally zero electoral representation in the process at any point in time. Like, it is fucking bananas to me that anybody on the left who is cheering for Kamala Harris can talk anything about believing in democracy in any meaningful way whatsoever. It's just gaslighting at this point. And again, like I want to say, I really want to believe that this process can work. But when we look at the evidence, we have to admit to ourselves, like, we've been engaged in an extremely abusive gaslighting relationship that's based upon our exploitation under the hope and the guise that what we're doing is democratic, when it's actually much, much closer to fascism. So that's sort of where I came from. And like, I get all of the far left arguments, in addition to, like, I'm very well read in Marxism. And it turns out at the end of the day that pretty much everything that's asserted is authoritarian bullshit. Yeah. And so for me, that's where I come at it from, is that, like, I get all of the arguments and you're just wrong. And for me, the big underline is like, I have zero interest in supporting the killings of other people. Like, I've been to the killing fields. I've been to different Holocaust memorial sites. Like, I've seen the cost of what it means to give the government radical power to enforce against its enemies. And it always ends with hundreds of thousands of people dying. So to me, that's my priority in stopping, is that, like, I don't want any governments to have the power to unilaterally murder their own population without any purview.
Yeah, I think, I mean, as I was mentioning, I think right before we started recording, there's a rise in independence, a rise in independent media from the left and the right, whatever, left, right, up, down, whatever, just a rise in kind of different thought from mainstream media, from rise in different technologies, rise in Bitcoin, all of these different things along the timeline that we just mentioned. And let's say, from what I believe was, modern history onward, is like 9/11 onward. Do you all feel that I do, that it's really like technology that changed, or technology played a huge role in changing this democratic process or authoritarian process? Like, I know I've like on air here, but also offline, I've talked with Alex Gladstein about like my complicated feelings about technology, right? Because technology gives governments and people like these real weapons they can use against citizens or against their enemies, or whatever the case may be. But then also it gives like power to the little guy, like Bitcoin and things like that. So it's this weird world we're going in, where there's both are going to be really, really amplified and really empowered, both like the individual and governments and corporations. And it's this like everything's just going up, and it worries me. So it's like good for things like Bitcoin, for freedom tech, for, Nostr, Signal, all these privacy things, but also government can also use these tools as weapons. And it feels very connected to what you're saying about the authority of the state, not because both political parties do it. So it's not like, and I think it's important to have this conversation on this podcast specifically. And hopefully, some people might have already been like, oh, I don't want to listen to the rest of this conversation, and turned it off. Like, I don't know that this conversation is going to go in a general track of a left, right, well, I'm this, so I feel this way about it. And that's just a shame. Like, I want to have an open conversation with you both, because I respect you both and your stories. So what role do you see with technology here? Has that amplified things, or has it always been like this in your mind? I'll start with you. Or Eric, go ahead.
I just wanted to take the assertion first of just being like, look, anybody who believes deeply in this left-right paradigm, I'm sorry, like, you've been fucking scammed. there's no discernible difference at this point in time. It's just literally about who and how you want people to take your power from you and what that represents. And right now, what I see between Kamala and Trump is that, like, to me, like, this is literally trying to vote between like a less capable Hitler and a less capable Mao. Like, Trump clearly enjoys power and is more than happy and willing to compromise around gathering power. And Kamala clearly hates the market and doesn't believe that free speech is something that all Americans are entitled to. So, like, it lines up pretty well with very deep communist ideology and very deep fascist ideology, in my opinion. And both of these are constructs that are fundamentally non-American in any meaningful way. And so, to me, the right-left paradigm at this point in time is an excuse to allow for the accentuation of the crisis that's, like, already here. Like, look, nobody's coming to save us. Nobody can deal with the debt problem. Nobody can deal with these extreme problems that come from technology except for you. And so, specifically on your point about technology, is that, like, the asymmetric divide between the individual and the state now is getting much more extreme. So, like, the technology that I have today, with being able to be, like, as retarded as I am, I can still encrypt stuff with SHA-256 or other encryption algorithms. And, like, that gives me the same power as the state in terms of protecting my information. Same thing with, like, my 3D printer. I can fire that thing up and print out however many weapons I would like to. Like, there's nothing that can stop that. And that gives me a radical amount of power. And to me, like, this all comes back just to technologies of war, which ultimately is a technological development on a whole. And so, like, now that I have these preeminent tools of 20th century warfare, from 3D printed weapons to encrypted algorithms to being able to have anonymized communications with collectives of people online, like, I'm way, way more powerful because I understand how to use this technology to my benefit. 99% of people, they're going to go into the digital panopticon and be caged in, because when the government dangles their 500 free CBDC dollars to them, they're going to go like, yeah, I'm signing up with my blood sample to get my free $200 of McDonald's gift certificates. And my truth is, you know what? You deserve exactly what you got. And it's not because, like, I'm a horrible person being like, ma ha ha ha. It's that most people have zero interest at all in sincerely thinking about what they want. And again, returning to the ideas of progressivism, I love what liberal ideology has to offer. It's very, very nice. It feels really good. And it's really great to believe in all of the ideas that it puts forward. But the radical truth is that when I try to allow for people who are much less capable and thoughtful than I am to make political decisions for me, they're more than happy to strip me of my political rights and economic welfare in order to provide for themselves. And so I just think it's we're in a really dangerous place where people, as long as they're clinging to their political identities as being able to save them, they're going to push us much deeper into a crisis that really has the capacity not only to destroy America, but to lock us into a totalitarian paradigm from which there is no escape whatsoever.
Yeah, I want to pretty much largely agree with Erik here in that, I think classic liberalism won, and it was the dominant force over the last, let's say, 200 years or so. And it won so hard in the Western world that there was nothing, Caesar wept for there were no more worlds left to conquer. Like, there was nothing left for classic liberalism to do. And so I don't think that the modern Democratic Party is in any way, shape, or form classically liberal. I don't think the Republican Party is either. I think classic liberalism has become our default, and it's no longer something that we need to, fight for. But now it's fracturing, and there are new camps. And to agree with Erik's point earlier about, we have a friend, Walker, who says there is no red, there is no blue, there is the state, and there is you. And it basically is. I think potentially, I'm just going to say this, and I think people are going to respond to it however they respond. I think our politics now in the modern era are a race to Hitler, based on the supposition that the other side is going to do Hitler. So you need to do Hitler first, so you get your own Hitler in there to stop them from doing a Hitler. We're in some sort of horrible downward spiral into authoritarian dictatorial control. And, earlier I said I'm planning to vote for Donald Trump. It's because I believe Donald Trump is, like Erik called him, a super ineffective Hitler. I don't think he's going to be able to pull that off. Whereas the Democrats have amassed a lot of power, especially back to the technology question. They've amassed a lot of power in big tech. Mark Zuckerberg just came out and confirmed what we've all known for a few years now, that the FBI and the Biden-Harris administration directly colluded with Facebook in order to censor the Hunter Biden laptop story during the 2020 election, which is direct election interference from a deep state intelligence agency and the sitting executive branch. That is extremely troubling to me. It would be just as troubling if Trump did it. I don't want to see anybody do things like that. And it feels like we've lost decorum and civility, et cetera. And back to the technology point, to key on Trey's original question, I think that the big thing we're struggling with is that privacy was the default in human history from time immemorial, and technology has slowly eroded it. Right, the internet's a real major erosion of privacy, but it was already a slow trickle of erosion before with telecommunications. The world has been getting smaller and smaller, and the world is now so small that they can essentially, they're near close to reading your thoughts. I have a friend who built an algorithm where he knows when you're planning. Trey was talking about moving earlier. He knows when you're going to move before you know when you're going to move. He knows that based on your search history. So he can build an algorithm that sells you moving services 2 weeks before you are aware of your own moving date, right? In some sense, Facebook knows your political leanings better than you know your political leanings. The FBI knows what you're capable of better than you know what you're capable of. We're running Minority Report style pre-crime on analysis on every human being on Earth with an internet connection. We now have the ability to do that. And with AI, we have the ability to search that. And every piece of digital information you've ever sent is kept in a locked file about you, your permanent record. This is in Ed Snowden's book. And now they have the ability to search through it and sift through it with AI and these LLM tools. And I mean, yeah, dude, we're any bright spot in that, Bitcoin, Nostr, even some of the things that aren't as perfect, like Telegram or Signal or whatever, those are things that I think we have to cling on to as tightly as we possibly can, and not let them go. And they are things that, if you are a freedom-loving person, you need to get very serious about. And I think we've all gotten serious about those kinds of things. But for people in the audience, I mean, it's the only bright spot in an otherwise dystopian future.
Yeah, I think the way I approach it too is, even if people don't really understand the important, let's say you're in the US, yes, we're talking a lot of dystopian stuff in the US, which in some ways is very legit. In other ways, a lot of people they go to work, they have barbecues with their friends, they have money in their bank account, they can move bank accounts, they can use Venmo, all of this stuff, right? They can live a pretty normal life right now without thinking about a lot of the things we're talking about, maybe for the rest of our lives. I doubt it, but maybe, at least for now. So I think at the very least, people need to think about these things and have these things in case, right? Like some people, some very smart, intelligent people that aren't fully into Bitcoin yet say, well, Bitcoin's an insurance. Bitcoin's just in case. For many of us, for me too, I'm all in on that, all in on things like Nostr. I see enough to know that it's crumbling. It's only going to keep crumbling. I don't have any faith in anything else like you guys are talking about. I think the one thing, if I'm being honest with both of you, that is the reason I still say things like progressive or left, or the reason I still engage in a political process, things like this. I think I'm very concerned about what an immediate shift would look like for all of those people that are not aware of what we're talking about, right? So the hundreds of millions, we'll just say just the US, even though it's crumbling around the world way faster. There are other people that can get this right away because it's already there. I think for me, and just an open question, how do we balance all in on Bitcoin, all in on this privacy stuff, all in on we have more of the technology and means. A lot of people don't realize okay, for a long time we've had state money. It hasn't been always like that, but we have Bitcoin again. So we don't need certain things that people think we do need, right? Like you don't need this central bank account. You don't need the Fed in the same way. A lot of our economy and world, though, is rigged to those things. And it would be a lot of really bad things for millions and millions and millions of Americans who aren't prepared in the ways that maybe the three of us are, or other Bitcoiners. So how do you how do you balance that? I think that's one of the hardest things for me in terms of wanting to obviously talk to normal people, my friends, about this stuff without sounding like a crazy lunatic all the time. Engaging with politics, it's hard, like where that balance is.
There's this scene in The Big Short that I always think about where they're shorting the American housing market, and they're jazzed up about it because they know they're about to make like $80 million, and they're high-fiving each other and dancing in the casino. And Brad Pitt goes, do you know what happens when the housing market goes down? People die. Like for every 1% unemployment, there's 40,000 suicides or something, and basically like the numbers shock them, and they go, the point of the scene is, he goes, just don't fucking dance. You can make money off of this, but just don't fucking dance. And I think that's where I'm at, is that I'm preparing myself and my family and my friends and everybody who will listen to me, frankly, for what I think is coming, and what I think is already happening in slow motion, and what could happen in faster motion as our politics keep getting, sort of more caustic. But at the same time, I'm not rooting it on. I don't want to see it occur. I wish we didn't have to live through this wasn't our particular crucible as millennials, but this is our particular crucible as millennials. We're living through the unwind of some 20th century systems, and we're not really yet sure how they're going to play out.
Erik, what about you? How do you balance that coming from, because I think a lot of the things we're talking about, right, would, let's say like a normie who, hey, I love NPR, all this stuff. Normie listens to NPR, like middle class New England person, like in my neck of the woods, whatever. They listen to some of the things we're talking about. They might say, "Oh, that's like a right wing crazy thought," or "That's like whatever." Like, why is Trey having them on the show? What are you saying, Erik?
My response is how did you come to the conclusion that that's a right wing crazy thought? Like, how did that actual thought get into your head?
Yeah, that's my point.
Something I believe very firmly is that like, the open internet now is just like a rogue brainwashing vehicle. And like NPR is like the tippity top of left-wing brainwashing. And they're really sophisticated at it because it's never just a hateful hit piece. It's always like this balanced thing where at the end it's like, well, so like it turns out that like Trump actually is like a far right fascist guy, and like it's pretty dangerous. But like it's really important that, look at all these people suffering horrifically in Ukraine and how evil Putin is. Like, if we're good Americans, we have to do something. And I'm like, as a liberal, you just got tricked into supporting a war that has shipped hundreds of billions of dollars abroad. And you purportedly are someone who doesn't support the extrajudicial murder of other people. Yet you did that. So like, which one is it? Like, are you actually a liberal that firmly believes in this? Because to me, like, unequivocally, even more than I identify as an anarchist or as a Bitcoiner, I identify as an anti-war person. And the reason why is because I've spent probably upwards of more than a year now in places that are specifically war zones. And I met people who have had their limbs blown off, have had their families murdered in front of them, have been gang raped by groups of soldiers. And at the end, I really had to ask myself, is it okay that my government sponsored other governments doing this? And to me, it was an ethical question of unilaterally, unequivocally, no. And when I have to look at the history of the 20th century after World War II, the fact that the United States government bombed more than 52 sovereign nations on its own accord, including bombing the United States, like we did that in 54 in Puerto Rico, it's pretty clear that the government has given itself a right to kill people outside of the legal system. I believe in the rule of law. I think it's really, really, really important. And the radical truth is after 9/11 and the state of emergency that was implemented, the government gave itself a carte blanche to go and kill anybody that they seem as opposed to themselves, including, our great liberal president, Barack Obama. He made the decision personally to murder an American child because that person was a child of a terrorist. In what kind of a fucking world do we kill people's children because we don't like what they represent in our world? I think that's a really important open-ended question for anybody who believes in this rule of government thing, because I personally don't think there's ever a reason that a child should be killed outside of the legal system. If you want to murder children inside of the legal system, go ahead. I'd be really fascinated to know and understand how you get that ruling, but go ahead. That's what the point of the legal system is. And to me, it's just so important to understand, like, we're so far past any kind of a legal purview. Like, why the fuck is it that George W. Bush got to initiate a war that killed more than 1 million Iraqis, and he literally gets to sit at his home in Texas and paint and then give that to other politicians that are, you know, I don't want to say they're guilty, but there's definitely some odd connections that implicit these people being part of pedophilia rings. And like, again, ooh, crazy conspiracy theory shit. Why don't you drop the kind of garbage that's been put in your mind by other people, and why don't you take on the other side? Is it possible that this stuff is going on? Yeah. Is it possible that Jeffrey Epstein didn't actually kill himself? Is it possible that Mossad could actually be carrying out intelligence operations in the United States against the American population? When you approach most people with this and they go, whoa, that's conspiracy theory, I can't do that. To me, that's the initiation of an induction process that people have been forced into, to where when you start actually thinking on your own, you have to go, whoa, this is conspiracy theory stuff. There's no way that any of this is true. Mission's been accomplished by the media vehicle. You've now stopped thinking at the key place where you should be thinking to yourself and going, that is really weird that Bill Gates went to Epstein's Island 35 times. That is pretty odd that Bill Clinton spent so much time with Jeffrey Epstein when it's pretty clear that island was specifically for raping children. But that's conspiracy theory.
Oh, HODL, you were going to comment, I think?
Oh, yeah. I think what Erik is keying on here is so key, first of all, which is metacognition, right? And for anybody who doesn't know what metacognition means, it means thinking about one's own thinking. And I think being able to think in a metacognitive sense about the media environment that you find yourself in is very important for understanding if you have been brainwashed or not. The people, I used to work in marketing. The people who are most susceptible to marketing are people who don't believe that marketing works on them. I know marketing works on me, and I find myself sort of in these rogue internet brainwashing algorithms from time to time, where suddenly I'm believing things I didn't believe 5 days ago. And I go, what's different? Why am I believing this now? And I have to trace it back, and I go, the algorithm has changed. And I've been reading like Twitter's For You page, and it's feeding me all this garbage about XYZ thing, whatever the topic is. And then I have to go in and consciously disrupt the algorithm, right? And if I don't go in and consciously disrupt the algorithm, the way I do it is I have two separate Twitter accounts. I have a Twitter account that's American HODL, where it's mainly posting and interacting with mutuals. And then I have a Twitter account that's a burner. And that burner constantly, every time I find that the algorithm has gotten me, I burn that Twitter account to the ground and I start a new one and I read it as a blank slate again. And then it has to relearn what I'm interested in every time. So it can't just like key off of the things that it knows, HODL's going to always click on car crashes. He likes to see car crashes because I don't want to be fed 1 million car crashes. Maybe I did click on one once and it knows I'll sit there and watch it because it's hard to look away from a car crash, right? And then I think with the boomers, people who are older than us, they're stuck in the traditional media apparatus, which has just been totally co-opted by state-sponsored operatives, right? Like it used, people talking about conspiracy theories. People used to talk about Project Mockingbird, like, oh, hey, man, did you know the CIA was infiltrating the news? Bro, nowadays, they just put John Brennan on CNN. John Brennan was the former head of the CIA. They don't even bother doing Operation Mockingbird. They put John Brennan on as a talking head to tell you what the fuck to believe in. That's crazy to me that we allow that to happen. And you have a whole swath of people out here watching. There was just a clip of Colbert, and he was talking to a CNN reporter, and he said, we all know CNN is biased. And the whole audience laughed. It was an applause break because the audience knows that CNN is not biased. They thought it was a joke. Colbert, who's a state-sponsored media puppet, is actually saying it like it's real. It's not real. It's fake. Most of the media environment you find yourself in is fake. Most of the internet is fake. And a lot of it is bots that are being controlled by the Pentagon and Chinese intelligence and the Five Eyes Alliance. I mean, Jesus Christ, it's like, at what hope does a normal human have to fight against the most powerful brainwashing algorithms that have ever existed? Basically, at some point, you just have to like walk away from the screen and think for yourself.
Yeah, I think I was talking about this with people recently. I think our like human brains, I think technology is like centuries ahead of what our monkey brains can handle. Like like even for me, you talk about the algorithm and stuff. Like we have the pod account on like X, and I'll post there for like, oh, new episode, this and that, but I don't like interact on X anymore or like engage. Like I cut down screen time. I don't do it at night anymore. I only go on Nostr. And even I'm wondering if Nostr gets bigger, am I gonna have to cut back from that? Like, all this stuff, right? Nostr's like in a sweet spot still where I can feel like I can engage with something real, but acknowledging like my brain was getting fried. My mental health was fried. Like everything was fried. I was like, it was overwhelming. Just everything was absolutely ridiculous. I think our brains just cannot handle this yet. Like evolution works a lot faster in the physical world, or slower in the physical world, than all of these digital realities that we find ourselves in. And I think this process, again, I keep just going back to 2000, 2001 and just the rise of digital media. I mean, the rise, like 9/11 at the same time that technology is rapidly advancing through the internet, is just a terrible concoction of government control, but also accessing all these things. And HODL, to your point, I mean, this is truly bipartisan. You'll see both types of people or whatever. I know, Erik, you're going to hate me saying left, right, but that's still the world that just a lot of people live in for worse. But a lot of people will be in these official capacities and then they'll retire and they'll write a book or they'll go on a podcast and they'll spill the beans, or they'll just be chit-chatting with people and they're like, oh yeah, they say the complete opposite. Like Colbert used to be fucking great on the Colbert Report, or like it was the time where liberals were more willing, because I think Fox News was like the big thing at the time, and George Bush was in power, all of these things, right? And then to your point, HODL, it's been a bit flipped in terms of that influence. So it's like all of these people, then they'll retire, they probably say the opposite, right? Once they're out of that official capacity. You see it all the time. So they're not really pretending much anymore. Yeah, the boomers are very, very captured from whether it's Fox News or CNN.
Well, and I'd point that out that like I very firmly believe like the right left paradigm serves to be an overlay for people to believe it's right left when it's not. It's a generational thing. And like in the Declaration of Independence of Cyberspace, John Perry Barlow specifically writes in that, he said something to the effect of like, you're so terrified of technology that you don't understand that you are happy and willing to give that over to governments who promise that they won't abuse it against your children, and they will. And so like, we're lucky in that we occupy a very specific space where we got to see the birth of the internet, what it looked like before it was completely compromised and controlled. And we understand the underlayings that allow for that to operate. To most people over 50, like this is just straight up magic. They have no fucking clue how it works. This is why they use the term hacked. And like, they don't understand that that's literally like a 19-year-old kid calling you up and being like, hey, what was your first dog? And they're like, oh, it was this guy. And you're like, oh, cool. And like, you're a Gemini, aren't you? They're like, yeah, like, this is my birthday. And it's like, cool. Thank you so much. Like, well, I've verified you. So like, now I've stolen your bank account and money. Like, I love you. And they're like, yeah, I love you too. They're like, wait, what did you say before that? And they're like, don't worry about it. It's cool. And to me, this is really important because like the paradigm has blown up. And as we've been talking about, this is about technology and the ability and capacity to understand it. Like, I'm not a technological kind of person, and I don't really like it at all. I find it complicated and difficult and intimidating. I also know if I don't take responsibility for it, I'm absolutely unequivocally fucked. And that's one of the reasons I believed in Bitcoin, is because when I first got into this, I was working at a dead end customer service job where I was never going to have any mobility. And not to mention that, like, because I was in such a negative place, I was probably going to get fired from the job at some point in time. So I was at the end of my fucking rope. There was literally no exit whatsoever from this fucked up, abusive, horrific system of control that is designed to make it so that you have to go do shit that you don't want to do for 40 to 60 hours a week just to scrape by. So when I saw that magic internet money man came up with a fixed supply currency that it seemed like nobody could control, I was like, this is a hell of a lot better of an idea than anything that's being proposed by the normal political establishment. And I would much rather lose everything that I have worked my whole life for in that system than to just allow for it to evaporate away by the inflation and the constant taxation at every fucking turn than to do that. And I would really encourage anybody listening to this to really challenge your beliefs, whether they are right or left, in that, are you actually looking at the technology itself as being a tool to help empower you, or are you using technology as something to enslave you? And so if you have all of your proprietary accounts at Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and you find yourself scrolling through that doom scrolling, and at the end of the night, you feel like shit and you just need to masturbate and try to go to sleep to not think about any of it, you might want to reconsider that you are not a technologically empowered person, but a technologically enslaved person. Now, if you're using stuff like Nostr and Bitcoin and you have a VPN and you understand Tor and you can get yourself on the dark nets, you might actually be somebody that's more technologically empowered. And I would encourage you to lean into that, because this is the only way that we are going to save ourselves in the future, because we will get centralized digital bank currencies. We will have totalitarian surveillance towards our financial system, and you will get cut off when you try to buy too much of something that you are not allowed to. And so, like, I would really encourage people that this has nothing to do with politics. This has to do with keeping yourself safe and saving your family when shit comes down. Because I guarantee in 1929, there was a bunch of Jews in Germany being like, is it possible this Hitler guy could win? No, they would never allow for that to happen. Why would anybody ever want to hate the Jews and kill all of us? That couldn't happen. And then, lo and behold, 10 years later, they find themselves in a concentration camp or a ghetto with all of the people in their community going, we just need to listen to these Nazi guys. Like, they don't like us. We don't like them. But if we just follow the rules, we'll be okay. And then they find themselves marching into a fucking death camp where they're watching people openly being killed. And they're like, this isn't working out so well. And if people don't think that that can happen in America, guess what? It fucking did. Like, there was an entire population of Japanese people in the United States just because we were suspicious of them. We stripped them of their fucking property and put them in concentration camps. Like, that happened. There's no reason why it won't happen again. And so, like, I go back to, like, this has nothing to do with politics. This has to do with your safety and whether or not the government decides you're an enemy of the state and need to be eliminated.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're enjoying the episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Bitbox. Now, Bitbox is a hardware wallet that's open source, incredibly secure and easy to use, and it's what I'm using to safely secure my Bitcoin in cold storage. Now, I know self-custodying Bitcoin can really be intimidating, but Bitbox is designed for ease of use without compromising on security. It's USB-C compatible and allows you to easily back up and restore your private keys with a micro SD card, which is really cool. Now, you can purchase the Bitbox using the promo code TPB at the link found in the show notes for 5% off your purchase. And I really want to thank Bitbox for their support of the podcast. All right, I'll let you get back to the episode now. I use these analogies a lot, not because I fully believe it. I'm not a fan of Trump. I don't intend to vote for Trump. A lot of times I talk to folks on the left or progressives that view Trump as like the Hitler, the worst thing ever. And so use analogies of like, okay, if you're XYZ or you're like an Occupy or like Black Lives Matter protest or whatever, like Bitcoin's good resistance money. Like I talk to people in ways, again, I don't think, and Erik, you might be very disagreeing with this, but I don't think that will happen right now. But I'm giving people examples that they can understand. I'm trying to be a bridge between what we're talking about here, that some people have already turned off the podcast, or some people are super into it and they think liberals are the worst or whatever. I'm just like, listen, I am still a bit of a romantic. I found myself more and more of like America and American values and like civil liberties that a lot of our heroes used to fight for. I'm still a romantic of that. Maybe I shouldn't be. I don't know. And there's a lot of people that are just going with all this that I'd like to be better equipped. I'd like to see them. Like, it's really sad to me that we even used to have politicians, be it Bernie Sanders or even Andrew Yang, that again, I don't think they would have like changed the system as much, but we're saying ideas that were a little bit different. Like Andrew Yang, like I thought about this last week. I was like, he was talking about how like, you know, whether it's work or AI or universal basic income, regardless of what people think of this, just saying like, hey, we're going like people are not economically feasible, like raising families, doing all this stuff. He was just saying different ideas. I don't think we even hear different ideas anymore in politics. I guess some people will think like Trump and their ideas are different, but then they come back with the same tariff argument. And one year it's the Democrats, one year it's the right, like all of this stuff, even different ideas in our system that they're said and then they're done. And then maybe they'll give them a podcast on some midnight CNN show or so. I don't know. You know what I mean? And we just don't even get divergent of thought at that level anymore. And that's what most people are listening to. And I think realizing that more over the years, I did get really, really skeptical and continue to be skeptical of any fix to this, which leads into my next point of in what ways can Bitcoin, either Bitcoin the thing or the things we're talking about, Bitcoiners, help fix our broken politics? Like, how can we actually talk to people in ways that they'll understand?
So I feel that often Bitcoiners get this analogy wrong or incorrect when they're speaking about what Bitcoin can do, will do, and they view Bitcoin as an exit from the system. I don't think of Bitcoin as an exit from the system because there's nowhere to exit to. There's nowhere on earth you could possibly exit to. In the 20th century, that was still a thing that you could conceivably do. If you were a Jew in Germany, you could get out of Germany and then you'd be free. You'd be safe. You can't. There's nowhere to flee to. The internet, the surveillance panopticon has already been built, and it's fucking it's everywhere now, right? And so I view Bitcoin as a sort of systemic cleanup of the world's economy and the world's political economy as well. And, essentially, if you think about how fiat money works, and I'm just going to assume, since we're on the Progressive Bitcoiner podcast, that people understand a little bit about fiat, and I won't dive into the whole rabbit hole there, but like fiat, as each dollar of fiat bounces around the world, it basically creates these distortions. And I think these distortions need a systemic cleanup. And I think Bitcoin is that sort of, it's like following each dollar and cleaning up its path as it goes, because we don't have effective price signaling anymore. And we basically have this group of cantillionaire insiders. These are the people who, like, during the great financial crisis, were gambling with people's pensions and then paid themselves handsome, bonuses, $50 million bonuses on the back of, the taxpayer bailout, which we all paid for. And I don't think anybody at Goldman Sachs ever bought your family a fucking nice steak dinner with their bonus. No, they don't give a shit about you. You're a sieve for them to bleed. You're something for them to steal from. It's like this kleptocratic control we have over our politics. I am hopeful that Bitcoin can clean this up, because at the end of the day, Bitcoin is violative of the state's monopoly on violence. Bitcoin hews very closely. It's the only way you manifest the non-aggression principle in real life. And so if they come to kill you, they can still kill you. You're still a meat puppet who's susceptible to bullet holes, right? But they cannot take your Bitcoin. You know what I mean? They can take your life, but they can never take your Bitcoin. That's important. That's powerful. That gives you an asymmetry. It gives you leverage. It gives you the ability to speak your mind and actually be heard as a citizen. And in America, money is speech, right? And so, we could have a conversation about like repealing Citizens United, and like I'm all for that. But like right now, the way the system works today, money is speech. Bitcoin is money. If you have Bitcoin, your speech will be listened to larger than somebody who doesn't have Bitcoin. And so I think if you want to be an active participant in the political process going forward, you're going to need Bitcoin. And if you want to protect yourself from an erratic political process going forward, you're going to need Bitcoin, either direction.
Well, doesn't that suck though? I was thinking about this too. It's like the games that conservatives or Republicans, 2 decades ago, played with money, influence, war, all this stuff. The Democrats just adopted that. So back to Erik's point, they do both play similar games, like especially like super PACs. Like I'm a big fan of I'd like to get rid of Citizens United. I'd like to see term limits. I'd like to see age limits, like all of these things that I think could get us in a direction. There seems to be no real movement there. Maybe some stock trading, but that's like low hanging fruit. Whatever. That still hasn't even passed. So there's all these things that like haven't changed. They're playing the same games. Like the Democrats are some of the top spenders. Like they're super PACs, right? Even though they used to be the party, it was like, let's not have money in Congress and stuff like that. It's absolutely crazy to me and frustrating in terms of they're both playing the same game. So there's no critique they can leverage. They're both doing that in terms of the influence. But Erik, I wanted to see your thoughts on if you think Bitcoin can be a check on government power and how, like an advantage of the individual, family, community level.
I think Bitcoin can be a fundamental existential threat to the state itself. And I think like that is part of the ethical and ultimately a spiritual movement, is realizing that like the darkness of the nihilism that we, like the United States federal government represents a rogue imperial apparatus that is anti-democratic and is kleptocratic. Like it fundamentally has created endless wars to enrich a very small class of parasites who are more than happy to kill, rape, maim, and enslave people to make a couple bucks. And like, if you don't think that that's true, maybe you should look at what happened during COVID, and that there was pharmaceutical companies and executives there that were more than happy to give you an experimental drug that seems like it has cause for horrific health problems across the general population. And like, that fucking sucks. It's super fucking dark, and I don't want to look at it because it's so horrific and wrong. But it turns out that like, this is what evil is all about. It's fundamentally about a disconnect from thought and even being able to consider that something's evil. And so to me, what Bitcoin represents is my complete refusal to participate economically within a system of exploitation. And I would love more than anything to see a radical political movement that looks pretty extremist. And it's not about electoral politics. It's that every time somebody comes up to you with a voter document being like, hey, will you sign this petition to get us to get it so that politicians can't have insider trading, then that's illegal? Like, look, like I firmly want to invite you, like, you don't have to play this game. I get that you've been brainwashed your entire life to believe that voting is the one way you can make a change, and it's fucking bullshit. That is the explicit methodology that's designed to strip everyone of their power and make it so that we have to comply to a system of extreme abuse. Like, you can actually refuse and say, fuck this. I hate all of this. I want nothing to do with it. I can't believe how deplorable and despicable all of this is, that you people want to negotiate around these pedantic, small, incremental changes that mean absolutely fucking nothing when we blow children up halfway around the world. To me, like, that's what I have to end. I never want another group of children to be blown up by an American drone bomb that had an AI decide that these people were fucking terrorists rather than children. Like, that's on all of us. We allowed for our political system to take that and do that with our money to other people. I don't want anything to do with that. I don't give a shit about what explanation is for why I have to vote, why if Trump gets in power, we're all going to die, or if Kamala gets into power, we're all going to be enslaved. Like, it's all fucking bullshit. And I encourage every single person to just refuse to participate in any meaningful way, because this will never, ever result in us getting any more freedom, of us dealing with the money problems, or with us actually finding new methods and modes to actually have a political discourse that means something. But if we burn it the fuck down and destroy the entire system from top to bottom and make every single one of our federal representatives fear for their lives because now they know that they're actually going to be put on trial for treason, because like, that's what's going on. Every single member of the federal government has participated openly in treason. And I would love to see states declare their independence from the federal government, seize their federal representatives, and put them on trial for treason, because that's what they've done. I firmly believe if Nancy Pelosi was put on trial for treason for engaging in insider trading and making deals that are going to benefit her personally, she would actually be found guilty. And I think it's really important that there's open conversations about this, because I want these people who believe that they can go and create wars abroad and have no accountability whatsoever, I want them to be accountable. I want George W. Bush to be hung for the fact that he killed more than 1 million Iraqi people because he misled the American public with the idea that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. And to be clear, that's the same guy that we installed into Iraq and had as our personal puppet, and we gave biological weapons to him so that he could carry out a genocide against the Kurds. We did that. These are all really important facts to integrate so that at the end you can go, wow, maybe this system's totally fucking broken and I shouldn't do anything with it. I mean, that's kind of my little diatribe about it. And I get that it's really fucking dark, and I'm really sorry. It's really, really hard to come to terms with this. And I get how most people reject it, because without Bitcoin, all you can do is go, wow, I'm actually just a general fuck puppet for the government, and they can come along and shove their dick up my ass at any point in time without lube. And it's really scary. Even if you enjoy that and think that it's like kind of a fun thing, I want to be clear that like, it's a one-way relationship, and you've just like fetishized your own submissiveness to that. You know, if like you want to engage on that on your own, that's fine. But you know, like, don't let the government do that to you, because you should feel bad about that.
How do you follow up with that? Well, I want to put too, like, what's so funny, like even just now, because it's so funny, like I'm friends with Nico, Simply Bitcoin, you know, they were banned for a little bit on YouTube, right? Even I know the things you just said, like I can't put this video on YouTube. Like I know that. It'll go on podcast. I'll throw it on Noster. Like I get
So
what
does
you're
your
saying.
freedom of speech actually mean anything in any meaningful way? Or is it just a complete bullshit fantasy? Because that's what I believe, is that like this whole idea of freedom of speech, that ended the day that 9/11 happened.
Well, we
You
also, though,
lost your freedom of speech.
I agree with Erik, but also I want to say, if they're coming to take your freedom of speech away, and right now we still have it in a ceremonial fashion, which is better than nothing. Okay, we still have it in a ceremonial fashion. If they're coming to take it away, the only logical thing for you to do is to use your voice as loudly as humanly possible. You should say every fucking thing you think is true and that you believe as loud as you possibly can. That's what you do right before they take it away. And if you don't do that, you're a coward. I'm not calling Trey a coward. I'm just saying, like, if you don't do that in general in your life, if you don't say what you think is true, you are living as a fucking weak, pathetic worm. I mean, it's just like, we are Americans, okay? We are imbued with free speech. That is our goddamn right, God-given right, given to us by God, inalienable. You cannot take that away from us. You can't even take it away from the people that don't believe in God. You can't take it away from anybody. That is an American's right, okay? And we're going to use it. We're going to use that free speech as loud as humanly possible to say whatever the hell we goddamn feel like. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's not it's not a political thing. And I agree with again, this is back to the romantic. I would like to say, even just having this conversation, if someone's listening and someone disagrees with anything, or they think Erik said something too extremely, it's like, okay, that's fine. Like, you should listen to things you disagree with. You should have conversations with different types of people. We don't do that in our daily lives anymore, in media anymore. And I think it's really important. Like, the folks who are, in my opinion, the folks who are on the right or libertarian or independent, or they're listening to Joe Rogan or whatever, they can kind of keep up with what we're saying. That's the reason too. Like, I try so much to talk to progressives on the left, even if people say that's a waste of time or whatever, like in the current, whatever. But I think it's still really important to me, because I want more of those people to learn and hear and understand some of the things we're talking about, because I do really think it's important. And I think for me, I've been really, really, really upset. And I try to tell my progressive friends. And again, it's not about voting this or that. The reason I get so frustrated, I talk a lot about Elizabeth Warren on this show, for instance, because Elizabeth Warren has been saying her whole entire reign in Senate that she will make life more affordable for people and this and that. Massachusetts has one of the highest rates of inflation and lack of affordability ever. Like, she can't fix it even if she wanted to, first of all. Second of all, she says she can. Third of all, she's not honest about the causes of these things. Fourth of all, she is the biggest threat to Bitcoin in America. And I'm saying that as a progressive left voter. I've voted for her before. I won't be voting for her again. These are things that people need to wake up to. It doesn't mean you need to then go and vote for Trump, because in my mind, what Trump does is then say, hey, vote for me. I'll protect your rights. I'll protect, freedom of speech and all this stuff. And then he has Truth Social. You know what I mean? Like, you're then just controlling who would you want the speech to be free for. It's the same problem in a different way. And I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I can understand Bitcoiners that are done with kind of Democrats at a leading way for being as vocally against Bitcoin as they are, and who might suggest and say, well, Trump is more open, even if he's full of shit. He's not trying to ban Bitcoin in the ways that Elizabeth Warren is. I am sympathetic for this. I just think Trump won't follow through on that. I also think Trump really can't control that. And I think we've got to win it in the courts. And maybe I'm too optimistic about the courts and about our American values that HODL says. I'm hopeful at the end of the day that even Elizabeth Warren can't really do much here. But I'm digressing. I'm really just trying to reach progressive and left still more. Those people that are stuck in it, to hear just a little bit, just an ounce of what we're saying, even if they disagree with so much else, and just hopefully hear something, because a lot of the independent audience, the Bitcoiner audience, they're already there in terms of some of this stuff, or being skeptical of whatever, government, corporation, whatever. It's my friends who are just like thinking they're going to have a normal retirement at the end of all of this, or thinking that things aren't going to get massively crazy throughout the world, like Erik talking about wars and things like that. There are a lot on the left that are already very like opposed with Gaza and with politics in general. Like that camp is starting to wake up again, but it's bad. It's going to get bad.
I think it's not just liberals, Trey, that feel this way. I think even the people that we've been talking about, the people we are and the people we associate with, Bitcoiners who are they're all in the fight on privacy and economic freedom and yada, yada. I think they all make the same mistake. And I made this mistake myself for a long time of thinking the world is going to be the same, but with Bitcoin at $10 million a coin. Not a chance in hell. The world is going to be so radically different when Bitcoin is at $10 million a coin. It'll make your head spin. I mean, the world is radically different just from Bitcoin's release until now. And Bitcoin's, sitting at 58K probably forever, 58K gang, rise up. But, it's going to be so radically different at $10 million, and you're not going to be the same person when you get to the end of the journey either, because it'll change you as well. And you can't sit on the sidelines. I mean, we all live in this world. We're all affected by what happens. We're all affected. We're Americans. Like we're affected by what happens in America. It affects us. Like Erik was talking about the million Iraqis that were killed during the Iraq invasion. I mean, that has it's at the time it seemed like nothing to us, right? I remember it clearly. What we were all just going about our day, living our life as if nothing was bothering us, because it wasn't right here. It wasn't in our face. But there's a psychic toll to be paid for that. And I think it's being revisited on us in myriad ways. Our culture is sort of like sick and diseased and like sort of suicidal in some sense, that like we've all taken Western progressive value, classic liberal values from the Enlightenment and just thrown them out the fucking window and said, to hell with these. We'd rather do, communism or fascism. And it's like, what the hell happened, man? Why is our culture so intent on suiciding itself? I can't figure it out, but I want to resist it when I feel it, and I want to fight against it when I see it in friends and family members as well.
Well, and this kind of, like, I have to ask you, Trey, you seem to really get it, but it also seems that your romanticism and hope, which I have the utmost empathy for, allows for you to cling to it. And like the invitation I want to give to liberals that are seeing this is that, like, I want to give you permission, like, you can abandon it. It doesn't mean that like you go become like a Trump supporter or something. Like, I am an anarchist. I firmly hate Trump as much as I hate Kamala. I think they're representations of different methodologies that destroy us on the right or the left. And I think that it's all completely unfunctional. And I think once you embrace the nihilism of seeing how fucking dark it truly is, and having Bitcoin as a light in that to protect you and your family, and from that light, utilizing the cryptography that provides true sovereignty to allow for a new technological approach, for me, that's what allowed for me to abandon my core left values. Because at the end of the day, like, look, like I truly believe in a lot of progressive ideals. What I do not believe in is I don't believe in the socialist idea that the government achieves those. I think progressivism is something that comes from individuals as a grassroots movement. And like my epic dream is to see a true political movement in the United States that involves people using Nostr and Bitcoin to reconnect themselves and build grassroots-based economic exchange with one another, and completely abandoning the political system and having that become its own total movement. And then at some point, it can make itself into a third party and go state by state and use Article 5 to amend the Constitution using states directly, completely abandoning the federal government. To me, that's the only strategy that we have through the political establishment to rescue America. But outside of that, like, I think it's just a hardcore grassroots movement of getting every single person to recognize that the political system has totally failed, that Bitcoin is the one way you'll be able to economically protect yourself, and that through understanding technology and really asking yourself to go, well, why should I use Signal over Facebook Messenger? Why is it important that I'm using Nostr over Twitter? Like, why should I make this sacrifice, and why is it important? Because I think once you empower people and give them a tool to actually go, look, like, as dark as things are, you can protect yourself. I don't think there'll be any achievable change. And again, like, I really wish this system worked. I honestly wish we could just go out and vote, and that there wasn't a bunch of gerrymandering and trying to manipulate and change the political system for one party's benefit over the other. But it's what it actually is at this point. And I'm really, really sorry, because like, it's super hard to deal with the fact of that everything that we've been told is the truth about the American political establishment is a fundamental lie. And it's really hard to come to terms with that, because like, it feels like you're abandoning Americanism and all of these other things. But the truth is that the most American thing you can do, in my opinion, is recognize how much the federal government has absolutely betrayed everyone, how much our state governments have supported that betrayal, and how at every step there is an authoritarian methodology that says, look, you just need to comply deeper to try to get the changes that you want. And I'm trying to say it's not true. And we can see that by the way that the last 30 years of the development of the American public has been. So again, I'm really sorry, but instead of doubling down and believing that if we just elect the right people, maybe really consider that this doesn't work anymore and that it's time to abandon that system and figure out ways that you can individually protect yourself and to find other people that have similar value sets.
I would also say that the classic liberalism didn't win because the state enforced it. Classic liberalism won because it had the moral high ground. And I think right now, Bitcoin has the moral high ground. I don't think that the right wing has it. I don't think that the left wing has it. I think Bitcoin has it. And society basically emerges from respect for person and property. And Bitcoin is the ultimate codified form of respect for person and property that we have. The Bitcoin network doesn't, this is an appeal to progressives, right? So like the Bitcoin network doesn't know what skin color you are. It doesn't know what religion you practice. It doesn't know what culture you're from. It doesn't know what groups you align with. It processes your transactions all the same. It doesn't care if you're a North Korean dictator. It doesn't care if you're a suffragette in wherever, Libya. It doesn't care. It doesn't care if you're a Muslim extremist. It doesn't care if you're somebody who's resisting Muslim extremism. It simply does not know who you are. And it turns out that a dumb rules-based order, a fair rule set that's enforced by machines, not humans, machines, right, who are not fallible to the same, sort of corruption that humans are fallible towards. It turns out that is the most fair and beneficial and beneficent system for all on Earth, not just Americans, but on Earth. This is a global system, right? So we're also giving a lot of times, people who are, I think, well-intentioned but misguided think like, let's give mosquito nets to those people. Let's give them biodegradable, eco-friendly toothbrushes. The fuck is that? It does nothing. They need property rights. They need defense of their property. They need defense of their time and their energy. They need to be able to store their wealth and their values so that they can have prosperity for themselves and their family. That is something that only Bitcoin is providing. The American government is not going over and providing it to anybody, although we like to claim we are while dropping Lockheed Martin's warheads on top of people. Right? So it's like, it's only Bitcoin right now that occupies the moral high ground. That's it.
I'd also point out that this ethical and moral stance that Bitcoin compels, like as superior as it is in that way, it's also economically superior. Like I was talking to the guys that do gridless out in Africa, and they're like, look, like our books look really good. We make a lot of money, and it's not because we're coming out here doing. Well, yeah, and I think it's really important. Like, look, we're not playing the white man's burden anymore. We don't get to engage in this hateful dialectic where we go, oh, us rich Westerners have to go help these poor, suffering Africans who are so lowly developed that they can never help themselves. No, it's because like they've been part of a system of economic imperialism for the last 200 fucking years that have never allowed for them to escape the poverty trap. And now Bitcoiners can actually come in, build out the energy infrastructure, make real money on being able to use that energy infrastructure at night when there isn't a load on it. And then during the day, people that have never had access to electricity before can access electricity for their first time. For me, this is one of the places that I feel fucking enraged at any liberal that is an anti-crypto person, because I go, you literally believe that us providing social services in an economically viable way for the poorest people on the planet is somehow an anti-liberal idea. Like, come on, guys. At what point are you going to realize that, like, you've been played? Elizabeth Warren is not your friend, and she is not trying to protect you from financial exploitation. In fact, she's taking money, more money than any other representative from the biggest banks. Like, it is asinine to me that Elizabeth Warren first came in as somebody who was going to stop the big banks. And now she's taking more money from them than any other representative, specifically to fight us when we actually have the core liberal values that want to pull the world's poorest people up and give them fair economic opportunity. And so at some point in time, like, I think that there has to be a strong intervention with the progressive community and go, hey, does the traditional American left actually represent our values in any meaningful way anymore? And I think the truth is no. And I would love to see a strong, radical third-party movement that is explicitly about rejecting both the current forms of the Democrats and the Republicans to try to make a new middle way forward for people. I think it's a very small possibility at this point. But with that being said, like, people are desperate and hungry for this. They're more hungry for this than anything else. And it's across the board. People are desperate for some kind of substantial and different political change. And I think if Bitcoiners took that seriously and ran with it, they could really do something with it.
I want to go back to your point. You said, I think you said something like, whether I'm romanticizing it or kind of not a part of the process, but you're like, seem to be agreeing with a lot of what we're saying. And yeah, I mean, I've been in Bitcoin since early 2021. I quickly got into Bitcoin because I was already frustrated with the two-party system, with the DNC after Bernie, with all of these things, seeing that things were not changing, with I shouldn't be having to try to figure out, can I have a retirement one day in the United States of America with this master's degree that I have? Like, all this stupid, very privileged, stupid stuff. And then realizing the global importance. I think for me, the challenge continues to be, it's kind of like, to your point, there's a lot of people that, and I do hope they listen. I hope they listen to this full thing. I hope they can sit in discomfort with maybe things they disagree on, and that be okay. Like, you don't have to agree with the whole conversation. That's absolutely insane. I regardless of what people may or may not think of me, I enjoy, I interact with a lot of folks in the Bitcoin community that think typically different political things from me. I read a bunch of different books. I read, I listen to a lot of different content and different things. I enjoy that mental stimulation, that mental exercise to think through. And I really hope that people that would vehemently disagree with you both for whatever silly reasons would listen and sit in this and think about it after the show. That is my hope. Like, that's the content I want to keep putting out because I think it's super, super important in this day and age. I think what's troubling for me is that there are so many people that, and maybe I'm a bit of this as well. I'm fucking scared. I think a lot of it is like, I hear all you're saying, but what the world looks like HODL, you were saying the world could look completely different, or will, if Bitcoin's at $10 million. Like, it's not about me and my family. I think I'm like, okay, I've kind of gotten into this enough where I feel comfortable with that. I'm more like the rest of our world, the rest of our country, the rest of our world, my friends, like all these people. I don't know what the world will look like. I mean, with a host of things like technology and digital stuff in general, government surveillance, privacy, Bitcoin and money. So I'm trying to relate to people in a way they can understand, but what you're talking about, they can be so captured by the system. And I don't mean this pejoratively. I just mean, like, even now, like, Democrats are really excited again, right? Because there's not just a super old guy that's a little senile running, and it's Kamala. I keep coming back to, and I kind of got in my head a little bit, not necessarily excitement, but just relief that Joe Biden is in it. But I'm like, oh man, this kind of keeps kicking the can down the road, though. You know what I mean? Like, it's, and again, whether Trump or Kamala is elected, it keeps kicking the can down the road. The U.S. is very good. Like, fiscally, I believe the U.S. can keep kicking the can down the road. Fiscally, politically, culturally, whatever, that we're kind of trying to say, hey, I know everyone's seems everyone's just kind of pissed off internally. Everyone's a little bit more frustrated and depressed, especially post-COVID, but they don't know what to do with that. So I think the majority of people can be somewhat in the realm of what we're talking about. They're upset, but action won't happen to actually change that system that HODL, you said we can't get away from. So that is, I don't have an answer. I think the answer might just be us all as individuals continue to try pushing for truth, pushing for Bitcoin, for Nostr, things that enable and empower the individual and communities, things that empower African nations and communities with fucking electricity and Bitcoin mining, these things that empower individuals and human rights causes. I think maybe that's my answer. But we don't know if we're going to win. That's terrifying.
I mean, we absolutely will win. And it's just because like both Nostr and Bitcoin cannot be killed. And like the people really don't understand how important it is that it can't get stomped out like that.
And the other system's clearly crumbling. I think that maybe that gives me hope too, is clearly, even if I am with you on that, and even the system, it just is already crumbling and at some point will topple regardless of Bitcoin and Nostr. But we also have Bitcoin and Nostr now, which is really cool.
Well, and I think like to truly embrace the angst that involves the existentialism of that, like the system is failing. It absolutely is. And you shoving your head in the sand and not looking at that is the exact same way as most people shove their head in the sand and look at the fact that like you will die. Like that absolutely unequivocally will happen. And it's fucking terrifying. It is the most terrifying thing to actually truly engage in, because you must deal with your own existentialism of that, like you will die. This system is failing. We will go into hyperinflation, and there is nothing you can do about that except for prepare. And to me, what I want to do is shove people into that darkness, not to have them lose themselves in it, but to truly grapple with that, like, okay, this system is failing and nobody I elect will change it. What can I actually do in a thoughtful and meaningful way to make a change? And to me, like there are two courses. One is retreat into yourself, prepare yourself, your family, your friends, and your community as best you can for what that means when it collapses. That's what I'm personally doing. You know, like I have a fruit orchard with 60 trees. We're in production. Like I can a bunch of stuff. Like I have a big vegetable garden. Everybody on my, like in the community that I live in, a lot of people have similar mindsets. Even though I'm in super liberal California, I live in a tiny libertarian enclave where like everyone used to grow weed out here. Everybody owns guns. Everybody distrusts the sheriff. That's part of why I live out here, and it's phenomenal. With that being said, when collapse comes, I think we'll probably actually be doing just as good, if not better, because our economic system won't involve the exploitation of the state. The other one I encourage it, and as I would love for you to take this and run, is like, I would love to see more of a central, if not left-leaning Bitcoiner movement that really understands the radicalism that is Bitcoin and go, look, like we need this, because like if you actually care about gay, transgender, black, whoever's rights, Bitcoin's the thing that actually achieves that. Like if you give a fuck about sex workers, you need to be educating them about Bitcoin. If you give a fuck about the people in Gaza, you should be sending them Bitcoin. If you give a fuck about the, whatever group of people that it is, you need to educate them about Bitcoin. And I have a chapter in my book about this called The Pedagogy of Bitcoin. Pedagogy is the philosophy of education and how you approach education. And to me, one of the most important things is that like we're not in a banking relationship of where I come and educate you about how cryptography is. Like we engage in a mutualist relationship where I show you Nostr and then you go, holy shit, like I could actually link up like all of my rancher friends together so that like we can just pay each other in Bitcoin and stay connected and let each other know when like cows and goats and shit are on sale. Like that is one of the most important things to me, is people just getting in their daily lives that you can now engage in economic exchange and not have the third party of the state in the middle of that exploiting it. And so when we are at $10 million of Bitcoin, as exciting as that is, we're also going to be at $50 for a carton of eggs, $70 for a gallon of milk, and your grocery bill is regularly going to be more than $1,000. And yes, congratulations, you're paid $250,000 a year, and that $250,000 a year has the purchasing power of $25,000. Like, and again, as a historian, I continually go back and repeat, like, look at what the 20th century was on repeat. It was literally governments continuing to spend their own money for war economies, creating crises, and then crashing it. Germany was the third largest economy in the world in 1920. By the time 1924 came around, the inflation that it came was so rampant and destructive that people that were from America living on a student's wage were able to buy entire apartment buildings for themselves. That's how fucking wacky shit got. If you don't think that'll happen here in America, I'm really sorry that it's so intimidating and terrifying, but just look at the numbers. Greg Foss does an incredible presentation looking at the numbers of what our debt is and what our entitlement expenditures are. And he shows that mathematically, there is no conceivable way to make it out of this. More than 78% of tax receipts at this point in time pay the biggest banks in the world on the interest that they are now collecting from the United States citizens. Like, this is all broken, guys. I'm really fucking sorry. It's really, really scary. And like, I don't want to go into the fucked up fourth turning cycle of where everything burns the fuck down, but the writing's on the wall. So we can shove our head in the sand and go, whoa, that's crazy. Did you see the game last night? Or we can go, whoa, that's crazy. I'm fucking terrified. What can I do to actually protect myself and my family? And I'm going to go, you need to own guns. You need to be growing your own food. You need to own Bitcoin. Those are the 3 key things that you want to do. Once you get those arranged, start linking up with other people that have same beliefs as you. Start educating yourself in the technology so that when shit goes down, you're safe. To me, these are the most important political things, and they have nothing to do with trying to elect other people, getting people to sign shit, or even participating in the political process. It's about understanding that personal empowerment by you having the knowledge of how cryptography works, how to grow your own food, and how to assemble a weapon, point it down range, and use it thoughtfully and maturely if you ever need to do that. And just to underline the point here, like, I'm an extremely peaceful person. I do not want violence, but if violence is going to come and find me, I will resist it.
It's your right to defend yourself as an American. It's your right to have speech. It's your right to defend yourself. You should exercise those rights no matter what your politics are. And, something people might not know is that me and Trey actually had a fortuitous encounter at PubKey in Manhattan where we drunkenly shared some fries. And by shared, I mean I stole Trey's fries while I was drunk. But in that meeting, I encouraged Trey.
Socialist.
I encouraged Trey to do the progressive Bitcoiner stuff. I was like, yeah, do more of it. Like, you should, and I'm a person who, I just said earlier, I'm voting for Trump and I don't agree with the ideas of the modern progressive, but I still was encouraging to Trey because I believe it's the most important thing in the world that the average person get Bitcoin and are able to, protect themselves from the sort of economic reality that we are not going to live in, but are already living in. We live in this reality. We are frogs boiling in this water. There's this great David Foster Wallace speech where, he says, this is water. It's all around you. We are fish in water. The water is the dogma that pervades our lives, the economic dogma, the economic reality that pervades our lives, right? It wasn't a one-off thing that happened because of the pandemic. That's not why groceries are now more expensive. It's going to keep happening. It's not going to slow down. Homes are going to get more expensive. Groceries are going to get more expensive. Gas is going to get more expensive. You'll be paid the same. You won't be paid more, And so I think the cheat code for a good life, for a prosperous life, is to understand that economic reality and to protect yourself against it with Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is the only way that I've seen for the average person to easily and simply be able to do that. And it gives you the added bonuses of having a call option on a beautiful future and having defense from tyrants, from tyrannical governments, whether that flavor of tyrannicism is communism or fascism, whichever one you're more scared of. Personally, I tend to be more scared of communism, but I totally understand if people are more scared of fascism. So what I'm saying to you is, like, if you are the person who Trey has been describing the entire podcast, where you're like, I hate this conversation, it's making me deeply uncomfortable, I think you should sit with that feeling. I think that's an important feeling for you. I used to have those feelings myself, and I would sit with them and ruminate on them and think, why am I feeling this way? And usually I think you'll come to the answer that you're feeling that way because you're supposed to fucking do something about it. It's time to make a change. That change is to increase your Bitcoin allocation,
And I also, like, I just want to interject and say, like, look, from like a progressive and left standpoint, like, I'm sorry that like it's easier for people on the right to see how this sort of aligns with their values, but I'm significant and severely disappointed with leftists in general and not seeing and understanding how extraordinarily valuable Bitcoin is to their perspective, more so because, like, I want to be really clear that, like, the typical classic enemies of the state, different minority populations, whether they identify as communists or sex workers or whoever, like, this is literally what gives you the economic protection so that like the state can't come after you and just bash you out of existence. Like there is unequivocally nothing more important. And I'm just beside myself with that hasn't came through. And so like I really just want to emphasize, like, it's really important and it's apolitical from this current paradigm that we're looking at it from. Like it helps the fascists as much as it does the communists. And that's not to say that it's just for extremists. It's that like it literally protects everyone from anyone making a unilateral choice about it, including like if you just have a spiteful fucking ex that's working for the bank that you bank with, they can just shut down your bank accounts, you know? And it's really important to understand that like this is about other people controlling your money, whether that's the government, people in the bank, or a payment processor. Like if people have the opportunity to be able to cancel you, they will. And Bitcoin's about you can't get canceled. Same thing with Nostr. We can't cancel you on there. If you want to go out there and talk about the communist revolution on Nostr, have fucking at it. If you want to go on Nostr and talk about fascism and how wonderful it is and how it's going to liberate America, go and do it. And the important thing is that no one can cancel you. And it actually embeds those American rights in the deepest of values. And so like I really, really hope that an astute and thoughtful person on the left will take a look at Bitcoin, because like I approached it originally from having a stance on the far left, and it allowed for me to really get why Bitcoin is important. It's not important because number go up and I get rich. It's important because if I want to buy things online that are illegal, I can actually do that and not have my bank accounts canceled. Like that's a pretty basic thing that I really think people should cling to a lot more and make a preeminent cause in their political paradigm.
Yeah, I agree. And guys, I think this is a good place to stop. I hope, like you said, HODL, I really hope, like, because people like to, whether it's me or the podcast, meme you or whatever, like Bitcoin Nostr, we have fun, we do all these things, but I do sincerely think this is a super important conversation and a thought. I really enjoy conversations like this. I'd really like to see people, especially in the US where it's highly, highly politicized, just sit with uncomfortable feelings or thoughts or things they disagree with more and do that. And hopefully they can come to our show. And I told you both, and I've been vocal about it before, we've been thinking about a rebrand for a while. We're going to be rebranding to Rebooting Money. People will still hear some left progressive stuff from me, but they'll also hear some other Bitcoin stuff from me or libertarian stuff or all over the place, right? I think we are entering into a new paradigm. We already have been. This is the great breakup that's been happening for years and years and years now. And I think people need to wake up to that. They're already feeling unsettled. And hopefully people will choose Bitcoin, will choose Nostr before they really have to, right? It'd be nice to do it of your own volition. I mean, it's always going to be volunteer, but I mean, before you really need to. And the left, I don't know if it's going to be, they need to be woken up in terms of things happening more against them. Like I've used the example of like Planned Parenthood could be debanked or something in a certain state. Well, you guys need to start. I've actually tried to reach out to Planned Parenthood and be like, you guys should start really raising Bitcoin or have like a Bitcoin treasury if you want to continue to operate in case the, like, for some of these people, maybe like radical right Republicans in certain states want to completely ban abortions, right? Like have Bitcoin. You can use that, use these privacy tools. I don't know if just more things like that need to happen for more people to wake up or XYZ. I've used the trucker protest example before and saying, okay, progressives, you might be like, oh, fuck the truckers, whatever. But like if it can happen, it can happen to you. And I've said that consistently for 3 years now, as long as I've been writing and doing stuff about Bitcoin. I wrote an article last year on Nostr saying, I think they're going to politicize free speech more. It's probably going to keep happening. And I was like, liberals, don't fall for it. Please don't. Like, I'm one of you, but I also don't really care about what I'm labeled at this point. It's more like, just please wake up, listen to what Erik and HODL are saying, especially in this conversation. But thank you both for this conversation. This was a blast. I think it's super important. Thanks for the work you're doing in the space. Any closing thoughts before we jump off? We'll be doing this again for sure, but any closing thoughts from this conversation?
First of all, Trey, I don't think you should censor yourself. I think you should upload this to YouTube, and then
the reason I said and I honestly will. I think the reason I said that was just a couple of points that I agree with, but I'm like, knowing the fucking like YouTube thing about like threats to violence, it was more like in that way. So yeah, I will, and we'll just deal with it. I
didn't hear, personally, I listened closely to Erik when he was on his rant, and I didn't hear anything that was extrajudiciary. So it's not illegal until it goes extrajudiciary. If you're talking about using legal processes to bring politicians to account, that's legal. YouTube might not agree with it, but it's legal, right?
But it's crazy. I have to think about this. It's Anyway,
Yeah.
but go ahead. I hear you.
You don't censor yourself in your mind. Let other people censor you.
No, I'm not, dude. And I really swear, I think a lot of it was because I was just talking with Nico about this from Simply Bitcoin, like offline about it. I'm like, oh, like hanging George Bush for war crimes. So many progressives and lefties would agree with
I'm
me.
not, and I'm saying that by putting him on trial. I'm not just saying like let's posse up and do it.
Judged by his peers. That's what Erik was saying.
Fair, exactly. That was the only thing, by the way. That was the only one thing where I'm like, fucking YouTube better not ban this video. It was more like in that. It wasn't like, oh, I want to censor this. It was more like, fucking YouTube better not do something about this. But anyway.
Erik has said way crazier things. And I don't think John Vallis's videos ever get demonetized, do they?
I couldn't tell you.
We don't know.
I think on my parting note, it's that like I've honestly been waiting my entire time in Bitcoin to find the left actually getting that like this is really important. And like I would fucking love to see Missouri cut off Planned Parenthood's bank rails for the left to get outraged about that. And then to like the moment that I want is for them to accept Bitcoin, to like get a bunch of Bitcoin donations and like get everything working in Missouri for Planned Parenthood because they got a bunch of Bitcoin donations, and then like listen to their explanation about that. Because like to me, this is just the brainwashing of that. Like the media apparatus has done an extraordinary job of painting Bitcoin as being the enemy of the left. And I'm really sad to see how little thought has actually gone into understanding that. And I hope at one point in time, there will be a prominent far left individual who will make Bitcoin their thing that they want. Because the other thing is like, one of my half-done projects over the number of years is that like I think there's a way to do a Marxist analysis of Bitcoin that essentially shows that like it's the truest form of radical labor that allows for individuals to like actually own their labor in a meaningful way, and that like it follows through Marxist theory all the way through. And I'm so extraordinarily disappointed that there has not been a single Marxist theorist that has actually looked at Bitcoin in a meaningful way. So I think at some point in time, this conversation will happen, and it will allow for the far left to actually understand that Bitcoin is more valuable to them even than the far right. So I really hope anybody who listened to this conversation, if there were any little hooks in there for them to really go down that rabbit hole and follow it, because to me, the only way we save America at this point in time is with a radical moderate movement that really takes American values and goes, look, like what we have in our Constitution and specifically in the Bill of Rights, like that's the most American thing that all Americans should want. And both political parties have made it very clear that they're against that. So we have a new movement now. It's about reinvigorating those rights. It's about creating a grass movement of people in different states working with each other on state legislatures. And it's about completely abandoning the federal government and talking about how it's only a traitorous apparatus at this point in time that is designed to funnel money from all of the 50 states into the war machine and redistribute that to global corporations that sponsor the military industrial complex. And if you really believe in far left liberal values, such as anti-war, Bitcoin is unequivocally the most important tool that you have in fighting that. Because now you actually have a true economic means to go after corporations. And it turns out that that's their lifeblood. So if you hit them there, you will actually hurt them. So I really encourage, if you are on the left and you hate how the way that your government kills innocent people abroad and how they do that in relationship with mega corporations, you should look at how Bitcoin frees you from that relationship in a meaningful way.
I think also I just want to add for the final parting note is that I know that there are a lot of people who are on the left who are very sensitive, particularly like, not to get into the whole political theory around emotions and politics, but like, care harm reduction is big for liberals. And a lot of people might feel like, well, why should I protect myself if like the world is going to get bad for everybody? Like we should all suffer that fate together. And I would say that, you need to put on your oxygen mask first. Otherwise, you're not going to be in a position to help anybody. And it would be better to be in a position to help others than to be in a position where you're suffering alongside everyone. Because at least then you have agency. At least then you have some optionality, And so, yeah, I think that you need to do what's right for yourself and your family, and not in a way that's I'm a selfish conservative who's going to go, live on, 100 acres in rural Wyoming, and it's just myself and my God and my guns and my dogs, and keep everybody away from me. You don't have to be that person in order to get Bitcoin. Although that person's based, I love that guy, right? Like that, he's a great American too.
I was like, I agree with like 80% of that. So that sounds not too bad, right? Like people that live in major cities know what I'm talking about. Like, God, a house and land.
Like that, yeah. But what I'm saying is, like, I think a lot of people on the left feel like that's not the archetype they are, and they're the archetype of like the helper. And if you are the archetype of the helper, then yeah, help yourself first so that you can later help others.
Yeah, I agree. Well, cheers, guys. Thanks so much for doing this. Folks listening, hit up. Where do you want people to reach out to you? Where do you want people to hit you up? I know we're all on Nostr. I would love to see people that listen to this episode, like throw up some engagement on Nostr. If you see the episode posted, engage with it on Nostr. Tell us what you think. Do you like it? Do you not? Where you agree, disagree? I'd love that feedback personally. But where can people hit you guys up?
I mean, I have a Twitter and shit, but like, Nostr is my favorite platform at the moment. So like, probably if you're looking for me, Nostr protocol. Yeah, you're right. Nostr is my favorite protocol at the moment. So if you're looking for me, that's where you can find me. And it's a little bit tricky to get set up on Nostr. So just, create an account, ask around. People are very helpful. They'll help you get set up.
Yeah, likewise. I'm planning on fully nuking my Twitter account in probably the next week or two. I just took a break this last month, and I was just realized how much I was engrossed in that disgusting cesspool. So you can find me on Nostr. We'll hopefully provide like a link or something. I have a website called Crypto Sovereignty where you can find all my various essays. I've been working on a project that I'm probably going to set up a new website and do that. And so please reach out if you have thoughts or opinions, even if you like fucking hate me and think I'm the worst Hitler who has ever Hitlered before. Please let me know. I'd really like to know why you think I'm Hitler. But yeah, at the end of the day, like, it's funny on the back end of this, like, to me, Bitcoin is all about peace and love in like the most radical way that has actually thought through philosophically, like what the ethical praxis of money is and how it exists in modernity. And furthermore, vis-a-vis cryptography and what cryptography represents, it allows for a new sovereignty in the digital age where if you don't understand cryptography, you will not have any privacy. So I really hope and encourage that, like, even if it's just like one dude who we managed or dudette who we managed or person who doesn't identify in those ways, like if any of them got any of this, I really hope that they will allow for each question that they have to be a waypoint for them to go deeper, because every single question they have has been answered and can be addressed in a thoughtful and meaningful way. And I'm of the opinion people on the far left need to understand that more than anything, to just get that, like, you're not going to vote your way out of this. There's no conceivable way through the democratic process that will get meaningful change. And I'm really sorry because it sucks. But with Bitcoin, you can protect yourself, your family, and your community. And if you allow for that to be the basis of a new political ideal, something truly extraordinary can be accomplished.
Yeah, agreed. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. This was a good cathartic conversation. Thanks for those that listen.
It was.
Thanks for sticking
Trey.
through.
And I'm happy that we're both, to me, getting to have these conversations that, we can say they're like across the aisle or whatever, but really just like getting that, like, we have way more in common as Americans than we don't have in common.
Well, I think it's
that's something I really want to get back to.
Well, it's those of us willing to acknowledge that we can't keep going on like this. So what are we going to do? That's kind of the way I approach it. And Eric, I feel like we'll have to do another up with Margot Paez in terms of like the left and like that kind of Marxist thought. I'm going to set that up. That would be really cool. She purposefully uses the word like communist and stuff. It's kind of like to trigger and to just get thought out there. But
I read her whole thing that she had
anarchist.
about. I read her whole thing that she had wrote about Jeff Booth as a communist. And it's funny because then I talked with Jeff about that and we were laughing because me and Jeff have had a lot of really deep conversations about like the totality of the newness that this is politically. Yeah. And that, like, because I've given my approach of that, like to me, what Bitcoin represents is a new political paradigm that takes the most extreme portions of all classic political theories, so the most extreme portions of communism, the most extreme portions of fascism, in order to synthesize a kind of liberalism that is actually the most extreme form of liberalism that against the current form of neoliberalism, it asserts itself in a way that unveils the fundamental lie that like is neoliberalism. So we laughed about that. And Ben Ark, me and him talk pretty deep on socialist theory. And I know he's friends with Jin as well. So
it's been
on my mind percolating.
Yeah.
So it's been on my mind percolating that I've wanted to have a deeper conversation about some of my Marxist research with those two, just because me and Ben have essentially been like, at some point we have to sit down and like workshop this thing out so that like we can essentially rewrite Das Kapital like under a Bitcoin standard and like what that would represent. Because to me, this all lines through of that like anarchism fundamentally is communism with the rejection of the state.
Yeah.
And like, that's really important because both want to achieve a stateless society. And I fundamentally believe Bitcoin allows for us to achieve a stateless society, but it's done without the state. So it's anarchist ideology through and through.
Yeah. Cool. We'll get it set up. TBD. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks guys. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.